Hello, I'm Admiral Bumblebee, and today I'm going to be talking about Line6's Helix native plugin. So let's just jump into it. The first thing that most people are going to grab is they're going to start running through the presets. And Line6 Helix comes with a number of presets. Like most amp simulators, they suck for the most part. However, I feel like the Line6 Helix has more usable presets than most. Yes, many of the presets do come with a bunch of effects on them that are totally worthless, but in this case, they are often disabled, set up so you turn them on like in having a pedal board workflow. The next thing you might look at is the cabs and the amplifiers, and I reviewed all of the amplifiers on my website at admiralbumblebee.com. If you go to reviews and then you go to the Helix review, you will find all of those. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about all of them. I will say that most of them are very usable. I'm surprised with how excellent the amps are. The cabinets are pretty good. There's not the greatest selection of them, and when you want to move the mic around, you can't move it around too much. You do get a distance parameter, and you do get an early reflections parameter, which adds a lot of realism to the sound. But if you're used to some other amplifier sims, then you might be kind of disappointed with the microphone part. But it does sound good. Let's just back up for a second here. You see that microphone slider? That's how you select microphones, with a slider. Yes, there is a little drop-down box, but the drop-down box isn't so great. Anyways, let's move on. Line6 has done a fantastic job including effects. There's dynamics modules, there's modulation modules, there's EQ, there's delays, there's reverbs, there's a bunch of distortions. They've added their own Line6 models that aren't actually anything in the real world, and then they have a number of models that are based on real world things. Some of their models are spot on, some of them kind of get close to the real thing, and some of them not so much. I did review all of these on the website, so make sure you check that out. Mostly though, they've done a fantastic job. I also like how you interact with the effects. Everything has a common GUI, so you're always interacting with sliders or drop-down lists, and you don't get confused having to find where the controls are or anything. Everything's always going to be in the same place, and everything works the same way. I really like that. So let's take a minute here to talk about impulses. In Helix, you have to import your impulses into the plugin. There's no browser that allows you to utilize the organization that you have using folders and subfolders. You have to go to the import dialog and then select files to import. And you might have to do this dozens of times, but luckily there's only 128 slots. So all those impulses that you've bought and paid for, well, if you want to use them, it's a lot of work. The next thing to talk about here is snapshots. In Helix, you have 8 snapshots. These save the state of your routing, and by default, the only thing that's saved is the bypass state of each block. If you want a specific parameter to be saved, you need to right-click it, go to Controller Assign, and then click Snapshots. Now, only that parameter will be saved when you move it. So you can have other parameters that can be moved all around, and nothing happens to them when you switch snapshots, but some parameters will change and go to a specific value when you switch snapshots. There's no saving or loading of snapshots. They're saved automatically when you change something, and they're loaded automatically when you switch to a snapshot. It's pretty cool, and it's really nicely done. If you wish to automate something in your digital audio workstation, then you need to right-click the parameter, go to Automation Assign, and then assign it to one of the 16 knobs or one of the 16 switches. There is only 16 knobs and only 16 switches. From there, you can automate that knob and it will move the parameter inside of Helix. Unfortunately, you can only assign one knob to one parameter. You don't get to do cool things like have automation control many things at once by having multiple of the quote-unquote knobs assigned to many parameters. That would be a great feature. You also can't invert the automation relative to what it's controlling, and you can't change the scaling. You can only change the range. So the automation is pretty annoying, but this was originally a hardware pedal, so it works. It's a good workaround. I don't like using it, but I understand why it's there. The main thing you'll be using is the signal path up top, where you can simply drag and drop things to different blocks. You can click something and then you can add a new effect very easily. If you want to have things in a parallel pathway, you just drag it down and you get a new splitter, which you can move to different blocks. You get a mixer, which you can move to different blocks. There's 2 parallel pathways by default. Right now I have the first pathway leading into the second pathway, but I can make this go out and then I can have this also come in. So now I have 2 pathways and I can quickly make this one go to the left and this one go to the right. And now I have 2 stereo pathways to put effects. It's pretty cool. And you can just drag and drop. Oh, whoops. You can drag and drop to delete stuff, or you can drag carefully to make your pathways. It's really easy to work with. I love working with it this way. There's no fancy graphics all over the place cluttering your screen and pedals across the bottom with all sorts of different knobs in different places. You just have this very clean looking signal path. It's great. I love it. The next thing to discuss is if you have a hardware Helix, all of this transfers to it and all of it transfers back. They have this studio to stage or stage to studio concept where everything you do on your pedal or everything you do in the studio, you can just take to the other one. So some of the design choices and some of the limitations make a lot of sense when you take into the context of you can actually just go and buy a Helix hardware pedal and have the exact sounds that you came up with in the studio. You just take it right out to the stage and you play that. It's a huge problem for some musicians who compose in the studio, where they come up with these crazy things, like one of these, here we go. Like you come up with these crazy things and you think, well, how am I ever going to do that live? Well, with this, you just throw it on your Helix pedal and that's it. You're good to go. Alright guys, I think that's about all there is for the Helix. Make sure you go to my website at admiralbumblebee.com. I have a much longer review that goes much more in depth, covering all of the effects, all of the amps. Some of my complaints about it go a little bit further than what I've said in this video. The main thing to take away is that my bandana is awesome. Besides that, the Helix is $399. Is it worth $399? For what you get, it absolutely is. It's worth a lot more. You have to think about whether or not you're going to actually use all those things in Helix. If you're a studio musician who works with a lot of different styles, absolutely. This is one of the best packages and one of the best deals that you're going to get right now, at least for the quality. If you're someone who just picks one sound and you use that sound, Helix might be a little too much for you, but if you really like to dig in and find variations of that sound, I think you might enjoy Helix. I enjoy the Helix GUI. I like working with Helix. That's the main thing for me. I just really enjoy using the interface. Using other interfaces like Amplitude and TH3, those drive me crazy. Can't stand it. There's all this visual clutter on the screen, pedals everywhere, amps everywhere, there's mics, and why? I don't want to have to constantly think about where all these things are. I have a studio with all these things. I just want my computer to look like a computer interface. So Helix does that. I love that. That adds a bunch of value for me. So if you can afford Helix, I would absolutely buy it in those cases. If you're just like a single amp, single effect kind of guy, it might be a little too much for you, but I think it's really one of the best amp sims out there right now, especially in terms of value. For authenticity, I think you can do a little bit better than Helix, but at the same time, the option that I'm thinking, which is Kazrog, is just amps and it's just IRs, impulse responses. So you don't get all sorts of effects, especially some of the cool synth pitchy effects and then the delay emulations and the reverbs and all that fun stuff. None of that comes with that. And then you'd have to buy all that extra. And when you buy all that stuff extra, Kazrog costs way more. But if you're an authenticity hound, then that is a better option, I think. I think that's the only option on the market right now that beats Helix. But as a total package, I personally think Helix is awesome. So go to my Patreon, patreon.com/AdmiralBumblebee. Give me money, please, because this is a lot of work, and people should be paid for their work. AdmiralBumblebee.com. I will see you later.